Okay, here we go. Hey, we're recording. All right. Welcome everybody to another Q&A as part of this year's 2022 San Francisco Independent Shorts Film Festival being held online and at the Roxy Theater. Today we're lucky enough to have some filmmakers with us from the program. What is this program? Help me out here. It is Bay Area Journeys. Some great documentaries in the program Bay Area Journeys. A lot of great films in this program here, and I'm eager to talk to each one of you. I could spend 30 minutes or more with each one of you in your films, but we don't have that kind of time. It'll just be 15 to 30 minutes. So welcome, filmmakers. Thanks for joining me.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Jason.
Good to meet you. How do you pronounce your name? Sabai?
Sube.
Sube. Forgive me.
Hmm.
Like I said, I may mess up. Sube. Joseph, good. You're safe now.
Yes.
No driving and zooming.
No driving and zooming.
We want you to make more films, many more films.
Definitely.
Joseph, since I'm on you, can you just do me a quick intro? Who you are, what's your role in the film that you made was, and a brief description of your film so I can put your face to your movie.
Of course. My name is Joe Pony, and I am the director and cinematographer for Campesinos, America's Unsung Heroes.
Beautiful film. Thank you very much. Sube, would you go next, please?
Yeah, my name is Sube Kyle. I am the director and cinematographer of Ramini, which is a short documentary about a water buffalo farm here in Tamales Bay.
Excellent. And Janet, your turn.
I am Janet Chen. I'm the director producer of a very short film called Women's Cut.
All right, yes. All memorable films, all wonderful little films. Janet, since I just asked you, how did it start? How did this movie come about? What was your inspiration? Very, very tight, cute, clever, and stylistic.
No, thank you. Yeah, it was, I think, format wise, it was kind of an experiment for me. So the film started, I'm currently a grad student at UC Santa Cruz in the social documentation MFA program. So I really wanted to do something that I hadn't done before. And a lot of my work, previous work, is more verite style. So I wanted to do some experimenting. So I think this is kind of what it became. And the feature person in the film is actually my partner. And I had always wanted to do something about kind of her kind of non-binary aesthetic and her short hair, because it's been a topic of conversation with family members, and also with friends, honestly. And I kind of wanted to tell the story from her perspective and her point of view.
Excellent. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Sube, what was the start of your short film, the inspiration, catalyst?
So the woman that is the owner of Ramini Mozzarella, she does tours and tastings. So I actually went about a few months before I did the short with my parents. They were like, we have this really cool opportunity that we found out about. Do you want to join us? So I went with them, and on that tour, she kind of tells you her story. You get to see the buffalo. You get to, if there are babies, you can go and pet them and hang out with them. And then she has cheese tasting. So then after that, a few months later, I had this new camera, and I was just like, okay, well, how can I play around with this and make something that can be productive and fun and cool and something that I'm interested in? And she came to mind. So I just reached out and asked if I could tell her story the way that I saw it.
And she was
said
totally
yes.
open and cool, no convincing or coercing or anything like that?
No, I honestly, I didn't know if she would answer the email because she's just so busy with everying that she does on her farm.
16-hour days farming.
Exactly.
Right.
Like she's a very busy woman, and the last thing she wants to do is, do the administrative side of that, so I wasn't necessarily expecting a response. I thought I'd have to email her a few more times. But she responded right away and said, totally, come on out, do your thing, do whatever you want to do. So I sent her a preliminary proposal and all these things, and she just signed off on it all. So she totally let me take creative control, which was awesome.
Nice. I could ask many questions to all you guys, but this is a good segue then to Joseph's. Not that Rimini is a farmer, but yours is about farming, Joseph.
Yes,
Talk about
yes.
that.
So Campesinos, America's Unsung Heroes, is a documentary on California field workers. And it shows the bravery, sacrifice, and hard work of these field workers during the pandemic. It was a project that took 17 months to film because we filmed during the lockdowns. We had two lockdowns. So we filmed during the first lockdown, then the second lockdown, the pandemic, the Sonoma fires, and many, many closed doors and cancellations. Dealing with and working with farmers and farm workers is very a tricky subject because a lot of them are immigrants, and so when you have a camera, it's scary. And so it took a lot of trust. It took a lot of faith on their part, but in the end, we were able to create this masterpiece that kind of shows who they are and depicts their humanity in a way that brings these unsung heroes to the light. And
What was
that's
the
what
inspiration at the start of this film?
this film was inspired by. The narrative that started in 2016 that all who were crossing the borders were criminals and people were stealing their jobs. And so we wanted to change the narrative. We wanted to inform the public about the immigrants here in California and how essential they are. And what better way to do that when the start of the pandemic happened? They were declared essential workers. And when they were declared essential workers, they still fought for protective equipment and the right to be seen. And our film did what was right and filmed this whole narrative for them.
Yeah. Many challenges. 17 months. How long, just in general, was the whole start to finish?
Yeah, it took about 17 months. The start to finish, as far as the film goes, is about 22 minutes long.
Now, how
And that
long to
was,
make the whole movie? Like, how long, many, longer than 17 months?
yeah, so it started in February of 2020, and we didn't finish until around October of 2021.
Wow. Got it. And what other challenges did you face, working with just the farmers and the farmers' hours and the farmers' lifestyles?
Yes. And so what we've discovered is that there's a farm worker crisis in California. Those that are tending the land are actually elderly because the younger generation doesn't see the beauty nor dignity nor pay in working the land. And so a lot had transpired with trying to get on fields. It's very difficult to find workers to film. It's very difficult for farmers to find workers to tend the land. And so we ran into a lot of challenges.
Other shorts have shown also of documentaries of farmers, even their children are not wanting to carry on the legacy. I won't say why, but they just don't want to do it.
Correct. And it's mainly because there's not a lot of money in farming in our day and age. The majority of the money goes towards distribution and retailers, but farm workers only get 10 to 15 cents on the dollar. And that has been research done by, I forget, but 10 to 15 cents on the dollar do farmers make. So they barely make enough, and farm workers barely make enough to even purchase their own fruit that they labor.
Wow. Sabe, your subject, the lead in your movie, also, she kind of acquired the responsibilities that she co-shared with her husband, and then he passed away, if I remember correctly. And tell us more about that, and then what's going to happen after she decides to retire.
Yeah. Well, so I think, as you said, Audrey started, her husband Craig, actually, it was his dream to start this water buffalo farm, and he came up with this idea of cheese making as a way to shift from being, I won't go really into it, but he was in Silicon Valley. He was in technology and he was in that track. And then he stopped and shifted and said, what do I actually want to do with my life? And this was his solution to that. But so she and her husband started the farm. And then a few years later, unfortunately, he passed away with, he had cancer. So it was very, very quick. And then she inherited all of the responsibilities of the farm. And it was just this crazy journey of her having to deal with losing her partner and having the responsibility of all of these animals that she didn't, it was hard to do alone.
Not to brush off the subject of the loss,
yeah.
but she seems to love it and be passionate about it.
Oh, definitely. So as she says in the film, she says that when it was started, she thought that Craig was going to be the primary person. She'd just kind of be around and she would do her own thing, but just to be present at the farm. But then she fell in love with the animals because they are super sweet and really smart and awesome. And then she was just there more and more and more. So that was kind of a good thing because when he passed away, she was able to take on that day to day pretty well. And yeah, she does it.
What's going to
really well.
happen when she decides to no longer do this? Did you get a sense of that? Like, does she have kids or anything that'll want to take over?
No, she doesn't have any kids. I think we were focusing mostly on, because it's such a young business and she has so many dreams for the future. Retirement's not really in her sights yet.
Right.
But and that's a great question for like some kind of follow-up thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, she doesn't really have any plans for retiring right now. She's actually running into some financial issues or just trying to rehome, and I think they've found a new home, but at the end of October they were supposed to move land and she hadn't found land. And so it's been this whole what's the future of the farm,
right?
Or so then what's the future of the farm when she's gone, kind of. But yeah.
Hey Dale, I see you've joined us. Welcome. I'll get to you in a second. If you're there, please be live so we can know you're with us, and then I can ask some questions. You got a picture?
Absolutely, yeah. Work's been a bear, so I just got in from London last night. But yeah, no, I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, if you can show us your face or visual, that'd be a little bit better. We'd appreciate that. Thanks. And I'll ask you a question in a second. Hey, there you are. And then, hey, Janet, on the same kind of thread, maybe not as serious, but what were the challenges of making your movie? And what I'm thinking in particular, because I have a partner I make movies with, and sometimes, the laptop is the recipient of the challenges. It gets pounded or whatever in the writing process. How hard was it working with your partner and making it? It almost seemed like her film. I mean, like she was the documentarian, the self-filmmaker, but because it was so authentic and intimate.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. Yeah, my partner's name is Kim. You see that in the movie. It was, I think it was definitely a process. She is not in the film field. She's not a filmmaker. She's actually a science teacher. But we actually had a couple conversations, pretty long conversations about this before we started filming. So it was interesting because I think we had always talked about our interactions with other people, about either if we go to some sort of event with family who haven't either ever met us from both sides, there's always questions about or initial mistaken misgendered, her being male. So we always talk about it from that situation, but I think for the two of us to really dig deep into gender identity, her gender identity in particular, was really interesting for our relationship. And then I put a lot of those conversations and just things that we had discussed into the film.
So I can envision maybe you did a family dinner or some sort of event together, and then that got your creative brain flowing, and you brought it up to Kim.
Yeah, I mean, it really happens in certain areas quite often where she gets misgendered, and we've even had conversations with friends who don't really understand some of the nuances of presenting traditionally male, maybe. and how that affects her psychologically, and her gender identity. So that's really kind of what I wanted to really get into, to represent how she, to hopefully represent how she actually feels.
And was she open to this project right away, or did you have to
Yeah, she's really supportive. I want to give her props. She's incredibly supportive as a partner. And you know, she, I think, is used to me running around with a camera. But I think definitely being in front of it and being the subject was a little different for her. So she had to get used to that. Yeah.
Yeah. She's really wonderful to watch and really open. Just feels really vulnerable and authentic in the movie.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I will definitely tell her that.
And hey, Dale, one of the things you missed, if you could do us a favor, hey, introduce yourself and the film that you are involved with, your role in it, and very briefly what it is, just so we can put your face to your movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dale Johnson. I was in the film Lead Change, and it really more or less featured me. It was done by a very talented filmmaker by the name of Michael Crocker, and really came around. I'm originally from Oakland, California, East Oakland, a community where, you know, it's the average income you'd say is like 23K, I think, or something along those lines. So really kind of coming out and becoming a polo player is not necessarily something that you'd see out of this neighborhood typically. And so
No.
really, not at all. And so it really kind of talks about my own experience and interpretation of the sport. The community, the polo community, is an amazing community, but I think it doesn't matter where you come from, polo can sometimes be a very elite community. And so it kind of talks about, Lead Change goes into my introduction of the sport, my interpretation of the sport, and how I've kind of made my way more or less through the relationship with my horse, Sunny. And so that's
Cool.
really what the film is about.
And hey,
Yeah.
Caitlin, thanks for joining us. We'll be with you in a moment. And hey, so was it true? I think I remember. I told these filmmakers I probably won't remember all the details of your movie, but Dale, I do remember something about boots. Was that a life-changing moment in Buenos Aires, finding boots?
Yeah, it was. You know, there are a few stories as to how a guy like me would get into polo. So for a lot of the Black Bay Area community, a lot of our roots tend to be in Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas. A lot of our grandparents, including my own, moved to Northern California during sort of the height of the Second World War, and they brought a lot of those traditions with them. I think this is unbeknownst by many. But Oakland has a very rich equestrian heritage. And so, yes, so there are two parts of the story. And the first one is I come from a family that has raised cattle. My grandfather raised quarter horses, was I guess be a cowboy, if you will, before he went to college and then into the Second World War. But then also, it was, to your point, it was the trip to Buenos Aires. It was that was the thing that kind of solidified it for me. I wanted to kind of do something that kind of lived out sort of my family's legacy. I'm not a Texan by any stretch of the imagination, not living there, not mindset, not anything, but there was something that I wanted to do that I think connected me, one, to my family that is still there. And then two, it was the badass polo boots that I saw in Buenos Aires. I was like, you know what, that's it. I'm going to come back home, learn to ride horses. And I was an athlete and I wanted to play polo. So that was kind of
Fun
how it
story.
happened.
Fun story. Hey, Caitlin,
Yeah.
thanks for joining us. Really quick, introduce yourself and your film so we can put your face to your film. And then what was the catalyst or inspiration to make the movie? Unmute yourself, please.
My name is Caitlin Manning. Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late. My film is Marcela. It's about it was the film about a woman, indigenous woman in Chiapas, in the country, and sort of her story of how she got, freed herself from some really shitty like home life and became a herbalist and a healer, basically. The inspiration was, I mean, I've been for the past few years, I've been, well, interrupted by COVID, of course. I've been doing a series of shorts in that part of the country in Chiapas, motivated partly by the resistance movements down there. There's a lot of indigenous villages and groups and people like resisting the what they call the mega projects that are coming in and trying to displace the people. It's a part of the country where there's like still a lot of indigenous community left. People don't even know about it, but it is, and people are still living a lifestyle that's very close to nature and that's very kind of like respectful of nature. And then you can see in the film like how she talks and thinks about her plants and the rivers and the trees and everything. So that was just the inspiration. I met her, and I met her at a meeting, and she was down for being filmed. So that was it. I mean,
Nice.
she
Yeah.
inspired me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, an inspirational figure for sure, and she definitely takes pride in her, knowledge of the plants and her, growing the plants and whatnot for part of and forgive me if I don't remember the details, but as far as like the oncoming revolution or resistance for, I took it as major developments, not just hostile kind of, but like, capitalistic, greedy
Yeah, big
projects.
projects like mining projects, dam projects, all these kinds of things that at this point, there's this big push to like enter into that part of the country because like a lot of the other places are used up the resources. So there's this major push, and so it's kind of a struggle for life of these communities.
Yeah.
And there is, I don't know if any of you guys have heard about the Zapatista movement, but there is a very strong, powerful movement down there that it actually has territory and runs it autonomously. Like they have their own schools, their own everything, their own health education system, and the government basically does not, the state, the Mexican state does not enter into their territory. They've developed it all themselves. So these are kind of like people who, Marcela has had some interaction with them. She was a Zapatista for a while, and then it was too long of a story to include in the
Right.
film, but then she sort of had to distance herself, but she continues with that idea of defending the land and the territory and the culture and the nature that is it's their family.
And so learning these natural items and like how to live off the earth, was that part of a plan for like this oncoming struggle, or it's a way of life? Like she is so knowledgeable about everything and what they can do for injuries, aches, nutrition. It's amazing.
Yeah, she was incredible. She never took her kids as she says in the doc, she has never had to take her kids to the doctor except to get vaccinated, which somebody pointed out to me, wow, that's really interesting during COVID.
Yeah.
There's this person who like never goes to the doctor because she knows how to heal her own kids, but she does go get her shots because she understands that those are going to protect her from something. But yeah, so it's both. It's a form of struggle and it's a way of life.
Mhm.
It's like people have lived that way for a long time, and so they're protecting that, and at the same time to be autonomous and self-sufficient allows them to remain separate from all those forces that are kind of coming at them.
Yeah.
So it's both a way of life and a way of struggle.
You kind of just hit on another kind of sub theme that this program could have been called, possibly like a way of life, for each one of your films. Dale, polo's now a way of your life. It's your livelihood too. It's everything, right? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so polo it's interesting. It's definitely something that's all encompassing. You definitely have to manage riding the horse and doing that every day. I work in tech though, so it's also a balance of life. It's how do you manage this horse, this life, playing competitions and things like that. But then there's also there's a huge community component we didn't touch on that. I work to get mainly Black and brown children in the Oakland area into riding programs and stuff like that. So working with a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. But yeah, it has definitely been a huge aspect that's kind of taken over a lot of my life. So
yeah. And then Joseph, you're talking about farmers. They live and breathe the land from dusk to dawn.
Yeah, they do, and their work never stops. And so we've been partnering with a local organization in Half Moon Bay called Alas. And we not only brought attention to the field workers in California, northern and southern, but we've been hosting private screenings, and all of the funds, outside about 20%, goes to about photos and having a videographer, but 80% goes to them. And we've been able to raise over $8,000 for field workers there in the Half Moon Bay area, and just been partnering with them and helping them with basic needs.
Wow. I'm just curious, how much sleep do they get?
They get sleep.
I know, but it's like
From
they,
8 till about 8 p.m. to about 4 p.m. But what helps that community is the organism of each other.
yeah,
They themselves wouldn't be able to survive without that community aspect. And then also organizations like Alas and like organizations that bring food and sweatshirts and protective gear.
yeah. You just inspired me to remind you guys, you also had beautiful imagery, either throughout the whole film or one point of the film. And Joseph, like, you know, the solo shots of the close-ups of the farm workers, like the wrinkles on that one older man's face, just, you know, memorizing. Just, I can't forget it.
Yeah, it took a while to gain trust. You couldn't just be part of a field and then expect to get the shots that you wanted. In the film, you'll notice they're singing. You will notice that they are fully comfortable having a camera around them, and it took days, it took weeks to have that comfortability with them and to establish that. And another challenge that I face is that I'm a third generation immigrant. I am someone that only speaks Spanish, bad words. I only know the bad words of Spanish. And so I don't know much other than that. And so it was real challenging, but I had production assistants that really helped translate. And that was my great friend Rodrigo and Oscar. They were there with me the whole time.
And then Janet, I also just kind of remember it's almost like it's a straight on POV film shot. Like it's almost like Kim's wearing a GoPro or something, if I remember correctly. What was the technique? How are you getting those shots? It's like we were in her shoes.
Yeah, I definitely wanted it to look intimate and for Kim to really look at the audience directly. So it was actually, I mounted a camera to the mirror that was in front of her. So it was this lots of duct tape, lots of yeah. So I mounted the camera facing her, and then I was on the side, kind of with the other camera filming her. So some of the side shots that you saw, and I wanted the two kind of cameras to look different a little bit. To the straight on shot is a lot more polished and more YouTubey, to kind of go along with that platform's look of YouTubers. And then the side was a little more verite and a little more going into her psyche.
Yeah. And Sabe, also, how was the production? Beautiful imagery, great, you know, low angle shots and close up shots of the farming and the water buffalo and all that stuff. Tell us a little bit about the production.
Yeah. So the production was pretty small. It was, I mean, as it sounds like a lot of us are, it is just me and my camera against the world. Kind of like what Joseph was saying, it took a few days for the water buffalo to become accustomed to me. And just like, especially because one of the first things when I showed up, Audrey said, when you're filming the buffalo, like for the beginning, just maybe stay, you know, so they can see you and your camera, but not directly in their face. So they get used to your presence, get used to you, because they're just inherently, she said, the buffalo and like other animals are inherently trained to feel the scope of something, whether it's a camera or the scope of a gun or just something, that intense focus, something is focused on them. It's like this, you know, sense where they feel like something's wrong.
Yeah.
And like I had a big honking lens on it, it's like a
Right.
big black
Yeah.
circle staring at them. But so yeah, it just took a few days of me getting to know the buffalo, and they're super smart. They recognize people and faces, and they got to know me, and then so did the women that work there, and then Audrey got to know me. And so it's just like figuring out what shots and when to shoot certain things to align with when subjects get comfortable.
It probably helped that she seemed pretty generous with her flexibility and accessibility to allow you to film.
Yeah, she pretty much just like I met her the first day. I kind of explained what I was going to be doing for the next. I filmed for 5 days. For the next 5 days, I gave her a shot, kind of a rough shot list, and then just said, do your thing. There may be one or two things that I observe in day to day that I'll say, oh, when are you going to do that again, so I can grab it. But like basically my whole goal going into it was to be as much a fly on the wall as possible, so that it wouldn't interfere with her production or anything, because she had a business to run.
Yeah. Caitlin, that reminds me of your film too. You seemed like you were pretty ingrained and fly on the wall, if you will, and just welcomed to the surroundings and the people in your film.
Yeah, I met Marcela in a women's group that I had been going to and being allowed to film, and then just I spent quite a bit of time with her, and a lot of time not filming, just hanging out with her and her kids. And my team is just me on camera and my boyfriend on sound, who I trained to do sound.
Nice.
And yeah, a lot of off-camera time too, just sort of hanging out. And I had some connections and some cool things to offer her, which was really felt great. Like, I brought her a lot of materials and literature and stuff like that she was really interested in. So I mean, she's my friend now.
Nice.
We're tight.
How long did it take to film and live with her and just hang out? Like, what was the duration?
Well, probably it was over the course of 2 or 3 years. I mean,
Wow.
traveled. I was traveling to Mexico, and then I go, and then I like, I need this much more footage. And I mean, I've done like 6 or 7 shorts, and so I just kept going until it felt right. And actually, I wasn't ready to film, because I felt there was a couple things I really felt I needed, but then COVID happened. And I'm like, maybe it's here. So then it felt right. It felt like it was good enough.
Great. We only have time for one or two more. I got another Q&A come up. Dale, how long was your shoot? Were you just available 24/7 for your filmmaker, or what was the
No, not at all. We shot it over the course of maybe 4 or 5 months. And so we did different shots of me practicing with my horse, the workouts that I do to stay kind of in shape here in my East Oakland community, and then different matches that I was playing too throughout the Bay Area. So they came as far as me as like to Oakdale, because polo isn't played close. You've got to kind of go out to the far flung, wide open spaces. So they got to go out there and meet some of those communities, which tend to be a lot more rural, a lot more horse-based, and really kind of looking at this juxtaposition of this guy from this complete urbanity going into these other spaces. So, and then it's funny because I keep my horse out in Half Moon Bay, and I heard there was a mention of Half Moon Bay here and with another caller. So, and then just going out there where we practice, and just going out there every day. And so we did that in between when I had to work, or at the end of the day, early morning. So it was interesting. So yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, I could spend at least 30 minutes or more on each of your films alone, but I don't have that luxury, unfortunately. So one last question, and Joseph, I'll start with you. What'd you learn about filmmaking, about yourself, about your subject? Something you want to share?
That mental toughness is underrated. As a filmmaker, it takes guts to stay with it and to see it through. And a career is what we're paid to do, but a calling is what we're made to do. And outside of the routine of life, out of our 9 to 5, these projects call out to us as filmmakers. And this was something that I felt called to do and had to see it through. And I know now that although it took a lot, I could do it again.
Yeah, and I think it was meant to be made too. Well done. Dale, what'd you learn?
Sorry, I had to jump off mute, but
That's all right.
Yeah, what I learned. So I was the subject of the film. The filmmaker Michael couldn't make it today, but what I learned just with him was just how he really wanted to try and capture this story that wouldn't typically Polo doesn't typically resonate with people, but he wanted to find a subject in a situation that really sort of showed the relationship between I hate to call it just man and nature, if you will, and not one that was necessarily conquering, but one that was more like symbiotic, one that was more of a relationship and little less of what people would typically associate with horse sports or even sports of this idea of like around dominance. He wanted to kind of get the story that kind of struck at the soul.
Yeah.
That this was more of a life about like more about sport and what it actually really takes to actually make these things happen. So definitely saw Michael's process, and it was really amazing. It was definitely an honor for him to come approach me and say, "Hey, can we do this on you?"
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing part of your life with us.
Yeah, thank
Caitlin,
you.
what have you learned?
I learned so much every film that I made.
And you've made lots of films.
Yeah, I've made quite a few films. Yeah, and in this one, I learned. I think it was the whole kind of living that closely to your natural environment and having like the one thing that stands out in my mind that didn't get into the film because the footage just wasn't. I kept thinking it was beautiful, and my boy was like, it's just not that interesting. But it was this huge falls that we were at, and she was just like, oh, she was like getting messages from the river and the falls, and she's just like receiving all this. Who knows? It could have been just like the way the water was falling. I don't even want to have to speculate about like what it was, but I could just see her like interacting. So yeah, it was just. And just just a different way of relating to nature than we do. And the other thing, I mean, I can't say I learned, it was just reinforces, is like people who are living in these areas fighting for their territory, they're fighting for all of us, right? Because they're trying to preserve these forests, they're trying to preserve this part of these parts of the world from being ruined by pesticides, by mining, and all this sort of stuff. So I was just reinforcing, like, these are not just people doing their own thing, these are people that are part of this like sort of important sort of global force,
Yeah. Wow. So true. Sube, you learn anything?
Yes. I learned a lot from this film. It was my first non-student film, so I learned a lot of technical things. I was the editor, cinematographer, so I learned a lot of technical do's and don'ts for next projects. I learned a lot about her business and the dairy farm business, and specifically water buffaloes. And then I guess I learned most profoundly, just like her story just reinforces the strength of the human spirit, and like kind of again along the lines of what Joseph said, just like the strength of persevering. So like this process for me was a strength of perseverance, and then obviously hers is a huge strength, journey of strength.
Every day.
Just like just people get pushed and pushed and pushed and keep doing amazing things.
Right on.
That's
Janet, last but not least, what'd you learn? I know you learned something about your relationship.
Yeah, make a film to get more intimate with your partner. No, don't do that.
Right.
So yeah, no, I definitely learned, because I usually make films, especially when I make films for other people or projects, to have a team. So I really learned that I can do this by myself again. It's been a while, hot minute since I actually just shot and conceptualized and produced and directed just everything myself. So it was definitely a really good way to kind of go back to what I did as an undergrad. And this is such a good opportunity. Yeah, definitely why I started filmmaking in the first place. So yeah.
And I have to think, your relationship survived the creative process, so you're stronger for it.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, hey, you're all lovely. Thank you for your time. I wish we had more time. Congratulations on making your film, getting into our film festival, and I hope to meet you in person someday.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Jason.
All right, people, that's all the time we have. Support more indie film at sfindie.com. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you.